I didn't mean to grab his hand. I swear. But when I saw her storming toward him, all fire and fury, something in me moved before my brain even caught up. His eyes met mine, panicked, desperate, and he whispered, "Please, pretend you're with me." My heart nearly stopped. I'm not usually the type to jump into someone else's chaos. I'm quiet, careful, invisible even. I spend my days drifting through my routines, my nights lost in books or music, trying to convince myself that living quietly is enough. But that night, in that crowded, dimly lit restaurant, all of that changed. He was sitting there, tension coiled in every muscle, eyes darting toward the entrance like he was waiting for a storm. And then I saw her. The way she stormed in, heels clicking against the floor like gunshots, a face carved from anger and history. And suddenly, the quiet life I knew felt meaningless. Something about him, this mix of danger and brokenness, made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. Not just alive, but like every nerve in my body was screaming at me, telling me to move closer, to notice everything about him, to memorize every detail in case he disappeared tomorrow. His jaw was tight, the corners of his mouth twitching, and the small twitch in his hand made my chest ache with an inexplicable empathy. Before I even thought about it, he reached for my hand. It was impulsive, almost desperate, and I felt my heart lurch. He whispered, barely audible over the clutter of dishes and murmurs of diners, "Please, pretend you're with me." I froze. My mind screamed that I should pull away, that this wasn't my problem, that I had no business stepping into his chaos. But my fingers had already entwined with his. I felt the warmth of his skin seep into mine like a dangerous promise. My palm was slick with sweat, but I didn't care. My heart was pounding like a drum, echoing in my ears louder than the restaurant noise, louder than the impending confrontation I could see forming across the room. I realized then how invisible I had been. Always careful, always watching, always staying in the background. But this stolen, reckless connection, felt forbidden in the most intoxicating way. I could sense the storm approaching, the tension so thick it made my stomach twist, yet I wanted it. I wanted to be part of his chaos, even if it meant being burned. Her voice grew louder behind us. Sharp. Angry. Enough to make heads turn. I caught a flicker of fear in his eyes, quickly masked with a tense jawline. He pulled me closer, just slightly, just enough that I could feel the strength in his body, the heat radiating from him like it was keeping me safe from the world. I tried to focus, to remind myself why I should stay invisible. But every stolen glance, every accidental brush of our fingers, felt like fire. I could feel it crawling under my skin, making my thoughts scatter, making my pulse accelerate. I hated how much I wanted him, how desperately my body ached to lean closer, to let my hand rest against his thigh, to let the warmth between us grow into something undeniable. I wondered if he felt the same. The way he kept glancing at me when he thought I wasn't looking, the way his thumb brushed over my knuckles lightly, almost testing, almost shy. It was like he was as terrified as I was. Terrified of what he might feel if he let himself care too much. Then I noticed the small things, the subtle way he adjusted the cuff of his sleeve when nervous, the faint scent of cologne that seemed to linger just long enough to make me dizzy, the way his lips pressed together when trying not to show fear. I wanted to memorize all of it. I wanted to keep it all with me, even if nothing ever happened beyond this moment. Her shadow loomed closer. I could feel the tension crackle between them like static electricity. And yet, in that moment, he didn't pull away from me. He leaned closer, almost whispering in my ear, so close I could feel his breath, warm and urgent, tickling the side of my neck. "Stay with me," he murmured, and my knees threatened to buckle. I nodded, though my voice caught in my throat. My heart was a riotous drum in my chest, my thoughts scattered. What if I did this wrong? What if she realized it wasn't real? What if I fell for him? The last thought made my stomach twist into knots. Then she stopped. She froze, like she saw something, like she knew. My pulse quickened. I dared a glance toward him, and for a brief second, vulnerability flickered in his eyes, a hint of fear that I hadn't seen before. But it disappeared as quickly as it came, replaced by that intensity, that magnetic pull that made me want to melt into him right there. We moved in sync without speaking, an unspoken language of panic and desperation. He kept his hand over mine, protective, possessive, like he could shield me from everything. I felt something dangerous stir inside me, desire wrapped in fear. I knew this was wrong. Knew it. But I couldn't stop. The restaurant blurred around me. I wasn't thinking about the other diners, about the soft glow of the chandeliers, about the rain beginning to tap against the windows. All I could focus on was him. His intensity, his vulnerability, the way he leaned into me even when everything else threatened to fall apart. And then, just as I began to settle into this dangerous new reality, a sharp laugh cut through the air. I tensed, ready for confrontation. But his hand didn't move from mine. Instead, his thumb stroked the back of my hand lightly. "Ignore her," he whispered, voice low, almost intimate. "Just be with me for a second. Please." My chest tightened. How could I ignore her when she was the storm we were trying to outrun? And yet, something about his desperation, his almost pleading eyes, made me comply. I leaned closer. My shoulder brushed against his. My hand felt smaller in his, fragile and real. And somewhere deep inside, a spark ignited, a dangerous, beautiful spark I couldn't put out. I caught his glance out of the corner of my eye. He was scanning the room, calculating, protective. And then our eyes met, and I felt the air between us shift. It was no longer just pretense. The way he looked at me made my stomach flutter with something that was no longer pretend. I wondered, was it too soon to feel this? Was it too reckless to let myself want him so badly? But I couldn't stop the way my chest ached, the way my fingers curled instinctively around his, the way my heart felt like it might explode. Every second stretched and contracted at the same time, a paradox of tension and desire. I could hear my own breathing, uneven and shallow, could feel his warmth radiating into me, could sense the storm of emotions threatening to consume both of us. And then she moved again. Not angrily this time. Just a subtle step closer, as if she had realized that this wasn't going to be simple. Panic flared in his eyes again. And just like that, the thrill of our forbidden closeness spiked to a dangerous height. "Do you always?" I started, my voice trembling, but he cut me off gently. "Shoo, don't speak. Just be here," he murmured, and my heart skipped so many beats I thought it might stop entirely. Every nerve in my body was alight. I wanted to lean closer, to feel him closer, to lose myself in the heat between us, but I also wanted to run, to preserve the fragile boundaries I had so carefully built around my heart. And yet, even as I thought about running, a part of me, a reckless, foolish part, wanted to stay. Wanted to see how close we could get before the world pulled us apart. Wanted to see if the fire we were playing with might actually burn something real. He shifted slightly, just enough that our knees touched under the table. I could feel the electricity shoot up my spine, feel my breath hitch, feel my pulse racing like it was trying to escape my chest. I hated how much I wanted this. I hated how much I wanted him. And then, something unexpected happened. A waiter brushed past our table, dropping a tray with a loud crash. My hand jerked instinctively, and his grip tightened, not harshly, just anchoring. My fingers curled tighter around his. My mind raced. Was it real? Was this just pretense? Or was something dangerous and beautiful stirring in both of us? I couldn't stop myself from staring at him, memorizing the lines of his face, the curve of his lips, the sharpness in his jaw. Every detail was seared into my memory. I didn't know if it was fear or desire, or some insane mix of both, but I knew I couldn't look away. And just when I thought the moment might stabilize, I felt it, the first undeniable spark of something more. His thumb traced a small circle on the back of my hand. My breath caught. My chest tightened. The restaurant, the confrontation, the rain outside, they all fell away. All that existed was us, this dangerous, forbidden closeness that neither of us could deny. Then, just as my courage began to rise, a shadow loomed over us. She was closer now, standing at the edge of our table, eyes sharp, and the panic in him flared again. And in that instant, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just about pretending anymore. Not for either of us. The line between pretense and reality was disappearing fast, and I didn't know if we could stop it. At first, it was simple. I played along, laughed when he made a joke, nodded when he introduced me as my girlfriend. The restaurant was buzzing around us, but in those moments, it felt like a bubble, one that existed solely for him and me. I noticed the subtle shift in how people looked at him when I was by his side, and a tiny, selfish part of me relished it. There was power in pretending, in being the one who could calm him, who could anchor him when the storm of his life threatened to pull him under. The chemistry? Impossible to ignore. I caught him looking at me when he thought I wasn't watching, his gaze lingering just a second too long. There was something dangerous in the way he observed me, like he was memorizing not just my face, but the way my fingers curved around my glass, the slight lift of my brow when I was intrigued, the subtle tremor in my lip when I tried to hide my nervousness. And oh, that look. It made me forget every rule I had about staying safe, about keeping my heart unbroken. I could feel my pulse quicken, my chest tightening as if warning me that crossing this line might leave permanent scars. He leaned back slightly in his chair, pretending to be casual, but I noticed the slight tension in his shoulders, the way he occasionally glanced toward the entrance as if bracing for an ambush. It was magnetic, the way danger and vulnerability coexisted in him. I wanted to reach out, to brush a stray lock of hair from his forehead, but I told myself to stay calm, to respect the rules I'd made for myself. And yet, I didn't. My hand twitched, my fingers itched to touch him, to let him know I felt it too. The tension grew with every stolen glance, every subtle movement that meant more than words could convey. Every time he leaned closer, I could smell his cologne, a rich, warm scent that made my head spin. The faint leather of his jacket teased my senses, and I felt as if I were standing at the edge of a cliff, teetering on something dangerous and thrilling. I wanted to fall, even knowing the danger below. His kindness was dangerous, gentle words that made me crave his presence, messages that left me smiling long after he was gone. "I'll pick you up tonight," he texted later that evening, and I felt a jolt run through me. I stared at the screen, heart hammering. My mind scrambled to justify it, to resist, but I found myself rearranging my life around him without thinking. I cancelled plans I had barely made, lingered by my window hoping for his car to arrive, felt my pulse spike the instant headlights appeared. The pull was magnetic, irresistible, and frightening. He wasn't supposed to matter this much. Not to me, not in this way. But the more time I spent near him, the harder it became to ignore the truth: I was falling. Hard. The subtle touches, the way he listened like I was the only thing that mattered in the room, the way he laughed quietly at something only I could understand, it all chipped away at my defenses. And yet, the reality of who he was, and who I was, loomed over us like a shadow. We weren't supposed to fall for each other. He had a past tangled with anger and heartbreak, scars I could see in his eyes if I looked closely enough. And I was just a girl who happened to be in the right place at the wrong time, a girl who had no business being caught in the pull of a man whose world was complicated and dangerous. I noticed the small things that betrayed the edges of his life. Every glance at his phone made my stomach twist. The way he hesitated before answering a text, the brief tightening of his jaw when a message came through, the way his eyes flicked toward the window like he was expecting someone, anything, made my chest ache. Jealousy became a constant, gnawing ache in my heart. I hated it, hated myself for feeling it, hated that I even wanted to be the cause of his attention. And yet, I did. It wasn't just the glances, though those alone were enough to send my heart racing. It was the moments in between, the stolen pauses when he thought I wasn't looking. The way his lips would curve into a faint smile, subtle, private, reserved for me alone. I caught myself replaying those moments endlessly in my mind, memorizing the rhythm of his breathing, the tilt of his head, the way the light in his eyes flickered when he laughed quietly. It was addictive, intoxicating, and terrifying. I began to notice changes in myself. I became hyper-aware, walking on edge, anticipating his texts, counting down the hours until I would see him again. I found myself lingering in places I had no reason to linger, hoping to catch a glimpse of him. My friends noticed a difference, the way I smiled at nothing, the way my eyes would drift off mid-conversation, the way I seemed distracted by some invisible thread pulling me toward him. I wanted to tell someone, to confess, but the thought of sharing this secret was unbearable. It was mine, and terrifyingly his too. Even the simplest moments were charged with tension. Sitting across from him, I would notice the brush of his fingers against the table, subtle and fleeting, and feel a jolt of electricity surge through me. I wanted to reach across and take his hand again, to anchor myself to him, but I was terrified of crossing a line we hadn't agreed upon. And yet, the line blurred with every heartbeat. Every glance that lingered, every accidental touch, every small laugh shared in a private bubble that the rest of the world couldn't see, it all became a dangerous game. I started reading into everything. The way he paused before ordering, the way his eyes lingered on me when he thought I wasn't paying attention, the way he sometimes spoke softly to himself in moments I couldn't hear. I was obsessed with understanding him, decoding his moods, anticipating his movements. It was exhausting, terrifying, and exhilarating all at once. And the messages. God, the messages. Are you home safe? I can't wait to see you. I think about you too much. Each one sent a wave through me I couldn't control. I would read them over and over, feeling my pulse spike, feeling that mix of warmth and fear that comes with wanting someone so badly you feel dizzy. I hated how dependent I was on his words, hated how much power he had over my heart without even touching me. It wasn't just desire, though desire burned hot and insistent. It was fear. Fear that I was too reckless, too vulnerable, that if I let myself care too much, I would be exposed, hurt, or left behind. Every glance at his phone made my stomach twist into knots. Every hesitation in his text replies became a dagger twisting deeper into my chest. I was addicted to the tension, to the unpredictability of it all, but every surge of desire was met with a sharper edge of fear. I started to notice the small cracks in his carefully maintained calm. A flinch at the wrong word, a twitch of his hand when the wrong person approached, the way his jaw clenched just slightly when he thought I wasn't watching. And I found myself wanting to protect him, to shield him from everything that might hurt him, even though I knew nothing about his past except fragments, rumors, glimpses. I wanted to be his safe place, even if it meant risking my heart in the process. The tension was constant, rising with every interaction. Sitting across from him, I could feel the heat of his presence, smell the faint leather of his jacket, sense the subtle, intoxicating cologne lingering in the air. My body reacted before my mind did. My breath would catch, my hands would tremble slightly, my heart would race as though anticipating something inevitable. And it was inevitable, we were both being drawn closer, unwillingly, inexorably, into a fire neither of us was prepared for. Sometimes, I caught him looking at me with that expression, the one that made my chest tighten and my stomach drop. It was a look that betrayed everything he tried to hide, the longing, the fear, the desire, the vulnerability. And each time I caught it, I felt my own defenses crumble. I wanted to reach out, to take him in my arms, to let him know that I was here, that I understood, that I was willing to risk it all. Yet, just as quickly, reality would crash back in. We weren't supposed to fall for each other. We weren't supposed to blur the lines between pretense and reality. He had a past tangled with anger and heartbreak, scars that went deeper than I could ever imagine. And I was just a girl, a quiet, careful girl, who had wandered into the storm and let herself be swept up. Every glance at his phone, every hesitant pause in his messages, every time his lips twitched with a secret smile I wasn't supposed to understand, it all reminded me how fragile and precarious this connection really was. Jealousy became a constant companion. I hated her, the ghost of his past, the woman whose memory haunted him, whose presence I feared might one day shatter what fragile closeness we had. Every flinch at a text, every subtle hesitation, every fleeting shadow of doubt twisted something deep inside me, tightening like a rope around my chest. I hated myself for feeling it, but I couldn't stop. I hated him for making me feel this way, but I also couldn't stay away. I started to notice my own obsession with the little things. The way he laughed quietly when he thought I wasn't looking, the tilt of his head when he considered something, the subtle way his fingers brushed against his lips in thought. I memorized these details, replayed them in my mind when he wasn't around, clung to them like lifelines. And every memory made my chest ache with longing and frustration. Even the moments that should have been simple, walking past a crowded street, sitting quietly on the couch, sharing a laugh over a joke, were charged with tension. I could feel the electricity in the air, the pull between us, the danger and the thrill of being close. My pulse raced, my stomach fluttered, my mind spun with anticipation. I hated how much I wanted him, yet I couldn't help it. And just when I thought I might be gaining control over myself, he would do something small, an almost touch, a lingering look, a message that made me ache, and the cycle would begin again. Desire, tension, fear, longing. It was addictive. It was exhausting. It was unbearable. And I was powerless. Then came the night that changed everything. The city was drenched in rain, sheets of it slapping against the glass windows of the streets like a warning. Every streetlight reflected off the puddles, casting fractured gold and silver across the asphalt. I could feel the damp chill creeping through my coat, soaking into my bones, but I didn't care. All I cared about was him. We were in his car, engine idling quietly, rain drumming a steady rhythm on the roof. He pressed me close, closer than he ever had, as if the space between us could shield me from the chaos of the outside world. His hand rested lightly on my waist, firm and protective, and I felt a heat spread through me that had nothing to do with the heater. My chest tightened, my fingers fidgeting in my lap, and I caught myself thinking things I shouldn't. Dangerous thoughts. Reckless thoughts. Thoughts that made my pulse pound like a war drum. "You don't know what you do to me," he whispered, voice low and almost trembling. I froze, my heart threatening to explode. Every syllable wrapped around me like fire, melting my defenses, igniting something I had worked so hard to keep buried. I hated how much I wanted him. Hated it. And yet, I couldn't deny it. Every time he said my name, something inside me shattered and rebuilt itself all at once, like an earthquake followed by a sunrise. I wanted to look away. I wanted to ground myself, to breathe through the danger of this closeness. But I couldn't. I was tethered to him by something unseen and impossible to resist. My fingers itched to slide up and trace the line of his jaw, to feel the heat of his skin against mine. But I stayed still, pretending to control myself, while my chest betrayed me, heaving with desire and fear. And then, she appeared. Not outside the restaurant this time. Not the furious, storming version I had glimpsed before. This time, her voice cut through the room like ice, sharp and cold, echoing against the walls. I stiffened, every nerve on edge, as he jerked backward, panic flashing across his face. My stomach dropped. My pulse raced. And in that instant, the fragile trust one had begun to feel for him felt like it could crumble into dust. I realized, I didn't know him at all. Not really. Not fully. His reasons, his fears, the secrets he carried, they were all far more complicated than I had imagined. The man I thought I had glimpsed in fleeting smiles and gentle touches was only a fraction of the storm that raged beneath the surface. And the more I tried to piece it together, the more my mind spun. What had he been running from all this time? And why did it feel like I had just been dragged into the eye of a hurricane? I felt the ground fall beneath me. 1 second, I was safe in his arms, enveloped by the warmth and quiet certainty of his presence. The next, I was teetering on the edge of an abyss I didn't understand, and my heart, stupid and reckless, still ached for him. I hated myself for wanting him. I hated myself for being caught in this web of desire and fear, knowing that falling further might leave me broken. I should have walked away. I should have let him disappear into his messy, tangled life without me. I should have let him deal with the ghosts that haunted him, the past that weighed on him like a shadow I could never reach. But as I watched him, eyes wide, panicked, searching the room, there was a vulnerability there I had never seen before. And when he finally turned to me, eyes soft and raw, the world outside the car vanished. I don't know how to do this without you, he said, voice breaking just slightly, carrying a weight that made my chest tighten even more. I felt it, every word a pull on my heart, every breath a magnet dragging me closer to the fire I was supposed to avoid. And I realized I didn't want to. I wanted to lean into him, to let myself fall without thinking about the consequences. I wanted to feel the pulse of his heartbeat against my chest, to hear his breath mingle with mine, to let the warmth between us consume every part of me. I wanted to be reckless, to forget everything I had told myself about being careful, invisible, untouchable. The rain outside intensified, hammering against the roof of the car in sync with my heartbeat. I could feel the tension in his body, the rigid lines of his muscles, the way his hands clenched slightly as if bracing for something I couldn't see. And yet, he didn't pull away. He let me stay there, let me feel his presence, let me drown in the dangerous closeness that made my chest ache with both fear and longing. I tried to speak. I tried to form words that might make sense, words that might pull him closer or push him away, I wasn't sure which. But my voice caught, and all that came out was a trembling whisper, why me? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, his hand shifted slightly, brushing against my fingers with a delicate care that made me feel both treasured and terrifyingly fragile. Finally, he whispered, almost against his will, because I don't know anyone else who makes me feel like I can breathe and fall apart at the same time. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes, though I didn't let them fall. I hated that I could feel this much, that I could be this exposed in front of him. And yet, I wanted it. I wanted to be the reason he felt alive, the reason he felt safe, even if it destroyed me in the process. Then she spoke again, a faint echo of her anger, and I felt a surge of panic spike through both of us. His grip tightened instinctively, and he leaned closer, shielding me without even thinking about it. I could feel the heat radiating from his body, the tension in his muscles, and I realized I was no longer afraid of the storm outside. I was afraid of losing him. I hated how much I hated her. Hated the way she made me feel small, inadequate, like I was only a placeholder until she returned. And yet, there was something intoxicating about the possessiveness in him, the way he instinctively drew me close when danger, real or imagined, loomed. I felt an addictive pull, one that made me tremble with a mixture of fear and desire I couldn't name. Time seemed to stretch and contract all at once. The rain outside became a blur of silver and gray, the city lights shimmering against the wet pavement like liquid stars. And in that suspended moment, I could feel everything, the way my chest ached, the way my pulse thundered, the way my mind screamed for caution even as my body betrayed me with longing. I'm scared, I whispered finally, my voice breaking, the words barely audible over the rain. He didn't hesitate this time. He tucked my hair behind my ear, letting his fingers linger against my cheek, and said, "Me too. But, not with you. With you, I think I could survive anything." The words hit me like a shockwave. I wanted to pull him closer, to press my lips to his, to feel the warmth of him against me, to let everything else fall away. But there was still the shadow of her, still the weight of his past, still the tension that made every move feel like walking a tightrope over a chasm. And then, silence. A charged, heavy silence that wrapped around us like a cloak. I could hear my own breathing, ragged and shallow, could feel the tiny shivers running down my spine. I knew he felt it too, the electric tension, the unspoken desire, the knowledge that crossing the line could change everything. I wanted to ask him to stay. I wanted to beg him to let this night stretch on forever. I wanted to be reckless, to abandon caution, to let the rain, the city, the chaos outside, and the dangerous intensity between us consume us both. But before I could, a sudden noise from the street outside, tires squealing, a shout, made him jerk, eyes wide, every protective instinct flaring. I realized in that moment just how fragile the bubble around us was, how close we were to shattering everything with one wrong step, one wrong word. And still, I didn't move away. I couldn't. My heart, foolish and defiant, refused to let go. I wanted him. I wanted him in a way that was reckless and consuming. I hated how much I wanted him, but I didn't care. Not anymore. And so we stayed there, pressed close in the car, the rain lashing against the windows, the city alive with noise and danger, and I realized the truth: I didn't want to survive without him. Not now. Not ever. The twist hit like lightning. I hadn't seen it coming, hadn't even allowed myself to imagine a moment where reality would intrude so violently on the fragile bubble I thought we'd created. 1 second, I was tangled in his arms, feeling the warmth and steady rhythm of his heartbeat against my chest, feeling like the world had narrowed down to just us. The next, a notification lit up my phone. A message. I froze. My fingers trembled as I picked it up, my eyes scanning the words faster than I could process, my pulse hammering in my ears. It wasn't just a simple text, a casual check-in, a forgotten hello. It was a truth I wasn't ready for, one that splintered the calm I thought I had. His ex. I had known she existed, a shadow from his past, a name whispered in passing. But I didn't know. I couldn't have known. She wasn't just an ex. She had been his world. His anchor. The reason he had built walls so high, the reason he had been so guarded, so careful with anyone who dared to get close. Every smile he had reserved for me, every gentle word, every touch that made my chest ache, it had been a risk, a gamble he hadn't taken lightly. And somehow, in all that chaos, he had chosen me. Not to replace her. Not because I was a convenient distraction or a temporary shield. But because maybe I was the only one who made him feel alive. The thought was intoxicating and terrifying all at once. My breath caught in my throat. My chest tightened. I felt a cocktail of fear, awe, and desire swirl inside me, spinning my thoughts into dizzying spirals I couldn't escape. I tried to understand it, tried to reason through it, but my mind betrayed me. My thoughts collided with my heart in sharp, chaotic bursts. Why me? Why now? Why after all this time? And yet, the answer, unspoken and undeniable, was always there: he had chosen me because I mattered. Because somehow, against the odds, against the mess and the storm, I mattered to him. The rain outside had slowed to a drizzle, tapping gently against the car windows like a hesitant rhythm, a quiet contrast to the chaos inside me. City lights reflected in the wet streets, flickering like distant stars, casting a surreal glow across his face. He held me like I was fragile glass, careful and yet impossibly intimate. Every line of his body spoke of a tenderness I hadn't dared hope for, every brush of his fingers a silent promise that he wouldn't let me fall. And I had changed too. I realized it suddenly, painfully, joyfully. Stronger. Braver. Wiser in ways I hadn't expected. I had walked into his chaos as a quiet, careful girl, invisible to the world, afraid to risk anything. And now, I was willing to risk everything. To risk the fire that burned and healed at the same time. To risk the unpredictability, the heartbreak, the intensity. Because it was worth it. Because him, this flawed, messy, beautiful man, was worth it. "We're messy," he said, voice low, almost a growl of vulnerability, but maybe that's exactly what we need. I felt the words wrap around me like a cloak, warm and unyielding. Messy. Chaotic. Broken. But alive. I nodded, unable to speak at first, my lips trembling with a cocktail of emotions that had no name. I wanted to tell him I understood, that I felt the same, but words felt too small, too inadequate for the storm raging inside me. I could feel the tension crackle between us, that familiar pull of desire mixed with fear, longing mixed with trepidation. My hand moved instinctively, brushing against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath his shirt. He stiffened for a fraction of a second, just enough to make my pulse jump, and then leaned closer, his forehead resting gently against mine. The smell of his cologne, faint and intoxicating, mingled with the warmth of his jacket and the rain outside, creating a heady mix I couldn't escape. And just when I thought we had found a moment of fragile peace, the rehook struck. A flash of movement from the corner of my eye, a figure in the shadows, a car slowing outside, a streetlight flickering, reminded me that the world outside this car, outside this bubble, was still chaotic, unpredictable. The tension ratcheted up again, a reminder that nothing about this was safe, nothing was certain. I felt my chest tighten, fingers gripping his jacket instinctively, my mind racing with possibilities. Was she coming back? Was someone watching? Would this moment shatter in an instant? He sensed it too. His hand squeezed mine, firm and protective, and I could feel the subtle shift in his body as he braced against the invisible storm outside. "It's just us," he murmured, voice steady but low with intensity, "right here, right now. Nothing else matters." The words were like fire in my veins. I wanted to believe them. I wanted to let myself sink into the safety of them. But I couldn't ignore the gnawing fear, the lingering shadow of the chaos that had defined his past, the knowledge that love had rules, even when it didn't play fair. I remembered every warning I had ever whispered to myself, the rules about staying invisible, staying safe, not letting anyone in too close. And yet, with every beat of my heart, with every brush of his fingers, I realized those rules no longer mattered. They were irrelevant in the face of this. In the face of him. In the face of the kind of love that was messy, dangerous, and yet utterly intoxicating. The car rocked gently as he shifted closer, breath warm against my ear. "I don't care about the rules," he whispered, voice low and almost reverent. "I care about us. About this. About you." I shivered, a mixture of desire and fear, longing and trepidation, coursing through me. I wanted to press closer, to let the world fall away, to be reckless in a way I had never allowed myself to be. My fingers traced the line of his jaw, memorizing the curve, the softness beneath the strength. I wanted to speak, to confess, to tell him that I felt the same, that I had been falling for him all along. But words failed me. All I could do was lean in, feeling the rhythm of his heartbeat against mine, letting the storm between us simmer without fully igniting. And then the city outside shifted again, a new noise, a new movement, a reminder that the world beyond this car was still chaotic. Street lights flickered. Tires splashed through puddles. A distant horn blared. And I realized, with a thrill that made my chest ache, that love didn't have rules. It didn't play fair. It didn't wait for the perfect moment or the safe one. It was messy. Unpredictable. Dangerous. And maybe, exactly what we needed. He pulled me closer, holding me like I was both fragile and essential, and I felt a wave of courage wash over me. I wanted this. I wanted him. I wanted the chaos, the fire, the messy, imperfect, beautiful love that had chosen me in the middle of a storm I wasn't supposed to survive. "We're alive," I whispered back, my voice trembling but resolute. Messy, broken, chaotic, alive. He smiled then, a slow, breathtaking smile that made my knees weaken and my heart ache in ways I hadn't known were possible. "Alive," he echoed softly, pressing his lips to my temple, a gentle, grounding kiss that sent shivers down my spine. And in that moment, I understood completely. Love doesn't wait for perfect timing. It doesn't ask permission. It doesn't care about past pain, about walls, about fear. Love chooses, and sometimes, it chooses you in the midst of chaos, in the storm, when you're only supposed to be pretending. The rain outside softened to a whisper, the city lights shimmering against the wet streets like 1,000 tiny promises. And as I rested my head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, I realized that I had changed too. Stronger. Braver. Willing to risk it all for a love that burned, that healed, that made me feel both fragile and unbreakable at the same time. The twist, the storm, the truth about his past, the lingering shadow of her presence, had not destroyed us. It had revealed us. It had forced us to confront the fire within ourselves, to embrace the chaos, to understand that love wasn't safe, but it was worth it. Every heartbeat, every stolen glance, every trembling touch had led to this fragile, incandescent moment where nothing else mattered but the two of us. And I knew, deep in my bones, that no matter what storms came next, no matter how messy, how unpredictable, how dangerous, I would never let go. Because love, the kind that chooses you in the middle of the chaos, was worth every risk, every fear, every trembling heartbeat.